Militants of the Libya Dawn Brigades have taken control of Tripoli International Airport after weeks of fighting. The group, which originated in the town of Misrata, seized the international airport after defeating their former comrades-in-arms of the Zintan militia, who had been united in overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi, but are now bitter enemies. The Free Rebels of Libya will ensure that they will not stand down in defending this country and its lands. And we put full responsibility on the attackers and those who supported them in any way, and also the responsibility of any reactions that might occur.
It is either a true turning point in the war against ISIS or another show of force that in the end will do little or nothing. As Islamic militants take hold of the airport in Tripoli, Egypt is getting involved. American drones and planes working the skies of Syria, and the tinder box is lit anew. Welcome back to MidPoint. Former State Department official, Deputy Special Envoy, and author of Smart Power, Between Diplomacy and War, Christian Whiton joins us today. Chris, thanks so much for being here today.
Great to be here, Ed. Thanks.
Chris, now that we have the airport having been taken over by Islamic fighters, what does this tell us then about the situation in Syria itself and the fact that it doesn't make a difference who you look at or how you look at it? It seems as if almost no one is in charge, and this country is right smack dab in the middle of complete and utter war, and no one has control.
That's right, and what's true of Syria, also true of Libya, and you have two big airfields being taken, one in Syria that's very close to a very important dam that will give the Islamic State, also known as ISIS or ISIL, control over considerable water resources and leverage in Syria. That's a big deal in the Middle East. And in Libya, now basically the capital, Tripoli, and its airport falling to Islamists, to the people who support terrorists. And you're having people in the region take matters into their own hands. That may not sound like the worst thing, that we're not the ones who have to do everything, but the UAE and Egypt bombing Libya reportedly, they haven't confirmed that. In fact, Egypt has denied that, but it's thought that they are acting on behalf of a secular-leaning General Haftar, who is trying to get control of Libya. Would probably be the best thing we have going there, since democracy didn't appear to work and the Islamists appear to have taken over. But we have basically a Middle East that it displays for everyone what the world looks like without American leadership.
What does this tell us now about the stability, or lack thereof, if you consider that, with Egypt now getting involved, if indeed they did, and basically kicking things up just a little notch here against Libya?
Right. I think it shows you that the situation really is out of control and potentially dangerous. It's fairly rare, actually, for the Egyptian military to go outside of its borders. Its main security concern is either internally with the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamist terrorists, or with Hamas and some of the factors involved between it and Palestinian areas in Israel. So to turn the other way and potentially actually launch military attacks in Libya means that it's actually very concerned. For an Arab state to attack another Arab state is a big deal. So they do not want another, Islamic State or Iran or you name your horror zone. They don't want that next to them, Egypt. They think that will cause problems in Egypt.
In your opinion, does this then signal some sort of an upgrade for Egypt here, perhaps looking at them, and perhaps they will now get more involved in the overall situation in the Middle East, become a player now in trying to stifle, if you will, whatever they're trying to work against, plus maybe even a help with ISIS?
I think in a way, yes. You're seeing all of these countries, many of whom are U.S. allies, basically reacting to the fact that they can't count on the United States at present. And it's not just Egypt. It's also reportedly the UAE with military involvement, potentially Saudi Arabia. And it's not just in Libya. If you look at Iraq, yes, the United States has started to push back on the Islamic State with very limited humanitarian bombings, which frankly are also reminiscent of Libya, where we're doing it for humanitarian reasons, but absent a broader strategy. And so Saudi Arabia doesn't like the Islamic State running what is now the proto-state of Sunni Iraq. They want to deviate that away somehow, and they're going to be supporting, I suspect, their own insurgents. So yes, you are having these allies step up, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be serendipitous for U.S. interests. You also have some ally and ally conflict. You have Saudi and the UAE, I think, very concerned, as are we with Qatar and Qatar's support for the Muslim Brotherhood and for Islamists. So really you have a region that's getting out of control. You know, I would love for us to be energy independent, and we're going slowly in that direction, but we are always going to have to worry about the Middle East. It's a major source of economic and energy resources, and it seems to be getting very, very nasty.
All right, here comes a soundbite from Jen Psaki. She's a spokeswoman for the U.S. State Department, speaking yesterday, talking about the situation in Libya, saying that it cannot be solved with violence. Here she is.
Libya's challenges are political, and violence will not resolve them. Our focus is on the political process there. We believe outside interference exacerbates current divisions and undermines Libya's democratic transition. And that's why our focus remains on urging all factions to come together to peacefully resolve the current crisis.
Chris, it's always nice to say peacefully resolve the crisis, but we very rarely ever see that happen anywhere, certainly not in the Middle East. So I'll throw it to you then. How then do you solve the situation in Libya? Second part of that question, though, what is the danger that America is going to get drawn into another conflict somehow, some way, that we're going to wind up being intertwined with Libya again?
Right. Well, a number of things there. First, I'll answer your two questions, but to start with Saki's comment, I mean, her talking points are a solid 3 years out of date. I mean, these people really have wandered off the campus into positions of power, much to our detriment. There's a war going on, and it's nice to be able to think you can talk your differences out, but once the shooting has begun, the way you advance the situation in Libya, and this is true of Syria, is you find people who are at least the least worst and support them with funds and munitions. And so to say that, oh, well, we need a political outcome. Well, the secularists who are in Libya fighting these Islamists, fighting people who will give safe harbor to terrorists, need weapons, they need resources. And there's actually a guy, General Haftar, who's referred to as a renegade general, but attempting to fight the Islamists. And so he needs not verbiage from the State Department, he needs support and resources. And why should we do that? Well, it goes to your other question. You know, there are serious threats here, whether it's the jihadists in Libya, who have already killed our ambassador. I mean, the group that just took over Tripoli, Libya Dawn, is an umbrella group of Islamists, and Ansar al-Sharia is going to be right there with them. As far as getting drawn into a conflict, I'm afraid we are, but not for the right reasons, which is because we realize there's a threat, we have a strategy, and we have a coherent plan to defeat them, but because we're just answering the inbox and responding to gestures. So we're staying out of Iraq, but now we're getting in, but only on a humanitarian basis. But it's going to be creeping into a larger mission, but without a strategy. And, you know, same across the region. You have in Syria now, we're doing surveillance flights, but is there a coherent plan to make life difficult for the Islamic State, to replace it with something on the ground, some other form of Sunnis who are less Islamist, less jihadist? Nothing like that's out there.
You mentioned Qatar earlier. There is no doubt in the minds of anyone who knows what's going on and uses common sense that Qatar is arming the militias. They're funneling money to a number of people, a number of terrorist groups, including even ISIS. So how do you stop these guys? I mean, you have to look at political pressure. It hasn't worked in the past. This seems to be a source here. Don't we have to bring the war, quote-unquote war, to Qatar sooner or later?
I think there's still a chance to try political coercion and diplomacy. I don't doubt that we've raised at sort of the ambassador level our concerns with Qatar. And what Qatar is basically doing is sort of, as Winston Churchill described, appeasement of feeding the alligator or the crocodile with the hope that it'll eat you last. They are trying to play footsie with Islamists, hoping that Islamists depose its government last. But they, of course, will eventually if Islamists have their way. You know, I think we could start by raising this at the presidential level. There's no indication that President Obama has tried real diplomacy, support our Arab allies in the Gulf Cooperation Council in pressuring Qatar, which is an errant member of the GCC, and if necessary, moving our air base. We have CENTCOM Forward, a very large air base in Qatar, which also brings with it an implied, not explicit, but implied defense agreement. And the implication is if we have an air base there, then we'll defend Qatar if it's ever attacked. Talking about moving that to another state, perhaps the UAE, if they're interested in hosting it. Those things, I think, would be good starters to really signal Qatar that the jig is up.
About 30 seconds left here. Is there any reason to believe that Qatar respects America at this point? And the only reason I ask that is, a lot of time we talk to you and other people as well. There seems to be very little respect for America or little respect to actually work with America. So do we have that with Qatar, at least at the beginning of the talks?
No, I don't think so. I think that the last 6 years have made it clear that whether you're a traditional strong ally or a newer ally or sort of a wayward ally like Qatar or Turkey, then you can do whatever you want. There's not a lot of consequence. There may be some words, some verbiage out of the State Department or White House. So the U.S. is seen as stumbling, as haphazard, as sort of thinking of strategy last in the Middle East, and all of these countries are basically cutting deals with the actors in the region, including some bad deals with bad actors. Not just Qatar. We saw that with Maliki in Iraq, and I think we'll see it in Afghanistan. So no, it's not a very strong position we're in.
Reminder once again, Christian Whiton's book is called Smart Power, Between Diplomacy and War. You'll learn a lot there and a lot what we do when we talk to him right here on MidPoint. Chris, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
All right, later on this hour, Common Core is anything but common. It's a train wreck. And after the break, the man fighting a corrupt police department years after the killing of his son. It's right here on MidPoint.